Okay, so today I want to talk to you about the vector devices that are part of Inspired by Nature in Ableton Live 11. And there is 3 devices. We have Vector FM, which is an FM synthesizer. We have Vector Grain, which is a granulator, looper and sampler. And then we have Vector Delay, which is a polyphonic delay. I'm going to focus on Vector FM for this tutorial to explain all the knobs and features, and then we will take a look at Vector Grain and Vector Delay in the end to see how they sound and what they can do. So Vector FM is an FM and subtractive synthesizer. It is really similar to Ableton's operator, but it uses particles that modulate the sound. So basically playing notes will generate particles, as you can see, if I play some notes. These particles are modulated by the attractor and the flow field. Simply click on the plus right there to see the attractor and the flow field. As you can see, now only the attractor is on, and that is this gray box in the middle. And what this does is it basically attracts the particles, as you can see. And we have 2 different types of particles. We have the yellow ones and the blue ones. This one is the blue one. And the yellow ones are negatively charged and the blue ones are positively charged. And to make the particles also interact with each other instead of only with the attractor and the flow field, we can turn on magnetism. And by doing this, particles with a same color will repel each other, and if they have different colors, they will attract each other. As you can see. And you can see them attracting each other. So we have a couple of settings for the particles that we can change by going to this menu. We can change the charge, so basically the chance of which charge a particle will have. If I set it all the way to the right, the particles will all be blue. And if it's all the way to the left, particles will all be orange or yellow. So let's set it back to the middle. The mass is basically how big a particle is. We can also randomize the mass. So each particle will have a different mass. And you can see that the bigger particles move slower and the smaller particles move faster. So you can also use that to alternate the sound. We can also set a spawn area. Instead of having them spawn all over the place, we can drag this and move it around to have a certain area for the particles to spawn in. Now let's take a look at the emitter. So instead of having to play notes, I can also turn on the voices right there. And this will spawn particles at a regular rate. So now we will have up to 2 particles. Now up to 7. And by turning on the emitter, we can change how these particles are spawned. If the emitter is turned off, all the particles will spawn at the same time. If the emitter is turned on, we can spawn them in bursts. And we can change how long the particles last and how much of a burst they spawn. We can change the rate live. We can also make them fade in and out. So that is really cool. So now I want to take a look at the force settings, which include the attractor and the flow field. So the attractor is basically this box, and we can move it around by dragging it around or by changing the coordinates. And we can change its behavior as well. By changing this slider, we can change the strength of this attractor. We can set it to a positive value or a negative value. And we can change which particles the attractor attracts. So right now it only attracts the positive or the blue particles. Right now only the yellow particles, and now both. And you can see now it doesn't really attract this yellow one at all. So, but if I change it to yellow, it will now attract the yellow particle, as you can see. So that's a cool feature as well. Now let's take a look at the flow field. which is a little bit different, but you can see it as a magnetic field basically, and we can change the direction of this field by dragging on the screen. So if we make a spiral, let's draw one on the screen and see if we can get the particles to spiral in circles. So if you now spawn a particle, you can see it's spiraling. And we can again change the strength and which particles it attracts. And we can also change the grid size from 12 all the way to 4x4. Now let's take a look at the operators. Right now we had only one operator enabled, but to allow for FM, so frequency modulation, we can turn on multiple oscillators or operators, and we can change how they interact with each other. Very similar to how operator works. So let's load operator to show this. If you go to the global tab in operator, you have these settings as well. So if you know operator, that is basically the same thing. Let's go back to Vector FM and take a look at the FM parameters that we have. So this is the part of the plugin where you design the sound basically. We have a carrier and a modulator. So the carrier, we select the waveform that we want, and then the tuning. And then we have the modulator, which allows us to create some more cool effects. So let's take a look. So if you don't know what a modulator is, it is basically a second oscillator that modulates the frequency of the first one. And it's the frequency because this is an FM synthesizer. So for the modulator, we can also select the waveform. Then we have three modes. We have Hertz, which is to set a free tuning for the second oscillator. Then we have this middle one, which allows us to set a tuning ratio based on the frequency of the carrier oscillator. If we have this 1-to-1, they will have the same frequency. But if we double this one, it will be twice the frequency of the carrier. And then we have N, which basically allows us to select a number of the harmonic based on the carrier frequency which is being played. So to showcase this, I'm going to play a C. So we are going to play the C and set this to 4N, which is going to select the fourth harmonic. So on a C, the fourth harmonic would be an E. And maybe it's hard to hear, but we can take spectrum and take a look at the harmonics. And as you can see, we have now set to 1. You can see the harmonics changing. And if I set this to 4N, you can see that this E, which is the fourth harmonic, will be way louder than the other, than if I were to set this to a different number. Then we can also change the index value, which is basically the multiplication value of the modulator frequency. And then we have X10, which allows us to change the modulator index to only use or work in powers of 10. And then we have these knobs on the bottom here, which are the directional modulations, as I like to call them. And these basically allow us to modulate values right there based on the movement of the particles. So if a particle moves horizontal, we can use this one. If it moves vertically, we can use this one. If it moves diagonally, you can use this one. This is for the speed and this for the mass of the particle. And these are the values that we can modulate. We have obviously none. And then we have C and M. C stands for carrier, M for modulator. And so here we have the carrier waveform, modulator waveform, carrier and modulator frequency. And then we have the index value, the gain, the panning, and then the frequency and the Q factor of the filter. The filter is a very straightforward filter, just like you would use a filter in any other plugin. We have a low pass, high pass, band pass, notch filter, a resonance filter, and a low pass and high pass in one. And then we can also turn on ladder, which basically is a different filter algorithm. You can look it up what ladder filtering is. It's a pretty complex thing behind the scenes, but if you're interested in that, you can look it up. Keep in mind that it uses more CPU, so if you are CPU limited, you might want to leave this turned off. So then I want to take a look at some final controls, which are these sliders to apply a directional force to the particles. Which is really cool. Then we obviously can change the scale, speed and gain of this device. And we have our basic ADSR controls. Vector Grain is basically the same device, but instead of using its own oscillators or operators, we can drag in a sample or record some audio to modulate it by using the same values that we can see in Vector FM. And then vector delay is also really similar, but instead of being an instrument, it's an audio effect, a delay effect. And right here we have all the delay settings. We have our time, glide, feedback. We can change the pitch of the delay. Then we have recycle, which will basically introduce pitch shifting to the delay. And now we have the panning, the gain, and the reverse delay. So that is it for all the controls of the vector devices. And now I'm going to take a look at some presets of them and see if we can find any cool sounds. One that I really think is cool, there is one with the wind, resonant wind. This could be really cool if you're looking into making some kind of wind for a background sound effect. And what's cool is you can see perfectly how this was made by going into the settings and taking a look at the carrier and the modulator and seeing all the values that are being modulated, and you can see it's very slow. And we have a flow field and no attractor. So yeah, if you're looking to do some sound design with basic FM, but incredibly useful and unique modulation, the vector devices are definitely a good way to go, and you can definitely create some really cool sounds with this. Feel free to let me know if you have any more questions about these devices, or if you're stuck with something, I will gladly help you out. If you like this tutorial and if you think it was helpful, feel free to let me know in the comment section or by dropping a like. And if you want to see more videos by me, consider subscribing. I make videos about making music, plugins, tutorials, and way more related to music production. My name is Matt Flank. Thank you for watching. Peace out.